Kia ora, New Zealand. We're now at alert level 2, and with a few restrictions, we can now safely reconnect with our loved ones again. So in this video, we're going to go over the do's and don'ts about alert level 2, and all of the information in this video can be found on the Unite Against COVID-19 website. So if you have any further questions, just hit the link in the description. All right, without further ado, let's get to it. Now, most businesses are open at alert level 2, and that does allow most of us to be able to go back to work again. With that, we are also allowed to go back inside retail stores and venues again. I'm sure for many parents this will be good news. Schools and early learning centres, as well as tertiary education facilities, will be open again, and also we will be able to travel between the regions as well. Now, initially, at alert level 2, we are permitted to attend gatherings such as weddings, religious ceremonies, and social gatherings as a group of up to 10 people. We can safely reconnect and socialise with our loved ones once again in a group of up to 10 people. We can visit our local cafes and restaurants, our favourite bar or pub, and that again is as a group of up to 10 people. Now, initially, this is only for seated dining. And finally, we can return to our favourite recreational activities again as groups of up to 10 people. Now, you've heard me say the limit of up to 10 people multiple times, and this is the initial limit. Now, depending on how we all fare as a team of 5 million players on stamping out the virus, Cabinet will meet again on Monday the 25th of May to decide on whether that cap of 10 people can be lifted. But until such an announcement is made, the cap for groups of people gathering together is 10. Another thing to be aware of is that you may fill out some of your details in what's called a contact register when you walk into a business or a venue. And this information will be very instrumental to the Ministry of Health as well as the local district health board in the event that someone with COVID-19 has previously visited a place where you have visited also. Same as before, in alert level 4 and alert level 3, we need to maintain physical distancing. And so if you're out and about, say you're going to the park or you're walking your dog, you need to keep at least a 2-metre gap between you and people that you don't know. All right, let's get on to the questions. Can I get a haircut? Yes, the answer is yes in alert level 2. Now, as you can imagine, your barber or hairdresser is probably getting absolutely slammed during this time, so it's probably wise to pick up the phone or flick them a message online just to ask if they can take bookings. And with alert level 2, a bunch of recreational activities are opened up once again. These include things like, yes, you will be able to go walking, biking and hunting on public there's a huge bumblebee. That's walking, biking and hunting on public conservation land. You will be able to go swimming at a public swimming pool, and likewise you will be able to go back to your local gym, but there will be some restrictions in those locations, so I'd recommend you contact your swimming pool or your local gym first just to find out what some of those restrictions are. And if you love boating or going jet skiing, then yep, you will be able to go and enjoy those activities again. And finally, if you're into duck shooting as well, the duck shooting season will begin on Saturday 23rd of May. Now, government is working with sports organisations around the do's and don'ts and how to keep people safe when they're attending sports games. So my recommendation to you is to just check in with your local sporting organisation to find out what the rules and do's and don'ts are. And finally, if you found any information in this video helpful, then please do share it with your friends. The goal of alert level 2 is really just to play it safe. So same as before, remember to wash your hands, fight the urge to touch your face, check in with your loved ones to make sure they're doing fine even in this time. And finally, if you exhibit any flu-like symptoms, then there's no shame. Get yourself tested for COVID-19 and it's easy to arrange. Just pick up the phone and talk with your doctor or give a Healthline a call, and you can use the number over here once again. And that's alert level 2. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Go to the COVID-19 website if you have any further questions, and we'll see you later.